Hey everybody, this is Jon Sherwood and my lovely wife Brittany. Together we lead the church here in Asheville, North Carolina, and we're super grateful to be able to talk a little bit about house churches. And we want to end with a few discussion questions that you can kind of kick around and noodle around. But I wanted to start by reading a passage here in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 that says, "In the beginning." And then you flip over, about 2,000 pages, and you get to the very last chapter of this narrative, and it says, "And they reigned forever and ever," in Revelation 22. So you have this narrative from in the beginning that has this sweeping arc all the way to the end of the story that says, they will reign forever and ever. And this Bible is this beautiful depiction, this beautiful story about how God is taking us to reign with Him forever. And you think, what in the world does that have to do with house churches? Well, that's a good question, my friend. So let's talk about that a little bit, right? One of the things I want to talk about is this missional mindset of house churches, because church is this word and nomenclature that is loaded and can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different people, some negative, some positive, some kind of neutral. And here we're talking about this idea of a house church, which obviously is much more similar to how our earliest brothers and sisters in the faith of Jesus would have met. But we're talking about moving away from this bigger Sunday gathering that kind of inadvertently forces people into a position of spectation rather than participation. And now we're trying to localize church, right? Localize the gathering of believers where the Spirit of God dwells and makes His resting place. We're talking about moving that into homes and moving that into localized areas of the community, and understanding what is its purpose, right? So one of the questions that you guys might want to discuss is, why are you meeting? What is the goal of your house church? Do you think in terms like that when you come together? Or is it just rote, routine, I'm doing it because this is what I'm supposed to do as a good disciple of Jesus or whatever? And then also to maybe think a little bit about the purpose and the why behind your house church, and how does that fit in with this meta narrative, this story arc of God saying from in the beginning to you will reign forever and ever. Where does your house church fit in that story? How does it fit into that narrative? How are you helping bring your community into this same story where people will reign forever and ever with God?
Yeah, I think it's so important to think of it as in that meta narrative, because it immediately brings us into that we're a part of God's story, that this is actually not our story, it's actually God's story, and we get to be a part of His story. And that part of Him allowing us to be a part of His story was after, in the beginning, He decided that He wanted to be in community with us first. And now He's calling us to be in community with each other, and then to go into our communities. And I think that's one of the things that I love about even going smaller into these house churches, is that we get to be community first with God on an individual basis, continuing that commune with God, but then with each other within our house church, and working out those community relationships there to reflect what God designed in His heart for us in these relationships. But then to really believe that we need to bring this community that God originally designed to our communities. We need to go into the world's community and really bring God community there.
And so we see that God also is on this great mission that He's inviting us into in the beginning, and then God's on this mission to bring all things reconciled back to Him through Jesus, that they would reign for Him or reign with Him forever and ever. And so our house churches, I think, if we're not careful, we can get kind of caught into this sort of selfish or consumeristic mindset about our house churches, that somehow they're there to meet our needs, whatever we perceive those needs to be, rather than our house church being an extension, not only our lives individually, but us collectively in this house church, in this community, that it's an extension of God's mission, that we're partnering, we're co-laboring with God on this great mission to redeem and reconcile all things back to Himself. And so I would invite you to consider and to discuss a little bit, what mission is your house church on? And is it the same mission that we see God on for humanity in the scriptures? And if not, in what ways are they different? How can we get our house church aligned with its mission to be congruent with God and his mission. And so maybe something you guys can talk about, something that you could ask is, what would it look like for us to be on mission as a house church in our community? Because I'm assuming that your house church probably meets at someone's house, which is probably located in some community, right? You're probably not meeting in some house that's isolated by 50 miles from the nearest human being. And if you are, then you can go evangelize the bears. But otherwise, go ahead and try to figure out, what would it mean for us to be on mission in this community, this particular community? Maybe having conversations with civic leaders or officials in that community saying, what are the needs? How can we help this community? Because I believe that's what God's wanting to do in each and every one of our lives, is to bring us not only to salvation and forgiveness of sins, but also to give us a job, a role, a mission to be on with him.
Right. I think about 1 Thessalonians 2:8. This is a passage we refer to a lot when coming back to this concept of mission, being on mission together. And it says, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. And I think it's an interest. I love the scripture because I think if we're not careful, we can neglect one or the other. We can either get so focused on sharing the gospel, but not really share in people's lives and share our lives with people. And so sometimes it can just come across like, here, this is what I know, let me tell you what I know, but then you have no real love and connection with people. Or it can go the other way, where we're totally great at sharing our life. We'll go to the gym with people, we'll go see a movie with people, we'll go to coffee with people, we'll have, I'm a young mom, we'll have mom play dates, and everything. But am I really, maybe sharing life together, but am I really sharing the gospel with these people? Am I marrying those two things together? And I love that God and his word understood that both of those things were needed to make the most impact in our communities. One wouldn't be as effective without the other. And so I think that is something, as we examine ourselves, as we're asking these questions, first individually and then collectively, all the questions that John was just asking, I think we need to start with ourselves first and then ask as a group as well. But one of the things to examine maybe is, okay, how am I doing sharing my life? And how am I doing sharing the gospel? And what area do I feel stronger in? Or what area do I feel like, man, I need to grow in that? And that's something I can really pray about and focus. It's amazing when we pray and focus on what we want to grow on. God is so willing to bring us there and show us and direct us how to do that.
For some of us, we might have been on mission at one point in our lives and have kind of lost focus or kind of strayed away from that type of a mindset in our lives, and circumstances of life start to sort of encroach upon this outward mindset, this missional mindset. And obviously the more that we live life, the more circumstances there are to do that, right? The more pain, the more suffering, the more disappointment, and we struggle through life, right, to try to make it what we want. And that's a challenge for all of us. But I would like to invite all of us, and this is what we're doing here, right, in Asheville, that Asheville, the general mission of the culture here is to enjoy yourself, to enjoy the beautiful scenery and the nice long hikes and the sunset and all of that. And God is inviting us on a little bit of a different mission, but I think that kind of mindset can happen even as Christians, even as we age, that we sort of become less and less about God's mission to reconcile and redeem all things, but rather to just kind of like cushion our own lives or sort of secure our own lives and our own comfort, whilst having this sort of veneer or outer coating of Jesus on it. And I want to invite us to really examine that, to ask the hard questions of, am I and my family, are we still missionally minded? And that goes beyond just studying the Bible with someone and baptizing them, though that certainly is included. It's so much more grand than that. It's about bringing God's kingdom, his will, his desire to have all things reconciled right here, right now. And that would include, the people that live in our community, at our workplaces, being able to enrich people's lives around us because our lives are being enriched by God himself. And so it's really cool to think about how early on in the first couple of centuries of the Christian faith, really the world was turned upside down from house churches, from small groups of Christians meeting together with relatively little centralized leadership telling them what to do. This faith spread all throughout the known world in a relatively short period of time, in just a few generations. And I think it's because people had this very strong idea and conviction that God had invited them not just to be saved and go to heaven one day, but invited them to be on a mission while they still had time left on this earth. And so that's exciting to think about, especially as none of us know what tomorrow will bring or how long any of us will live. And I want to also encourage that. We've been studying Ecclesiastes as a church, and we've been studying the Bible with a young man who was 18 years old, went home for the summer from college here in Asheville, and he wrecked his car on the interstate, and he survived. He walked away without a scratch, and he called me that same day and said, time is short, I got to get right with God. And it reminded me of how serious and urgent this mission is, because life can be so fragile. So thank you guys for being a part of this with us, and I hope that this is encouraging to you and provides some great discussion for your group.